Hello, hello, Barnes& and Noble Book Club. I'm so happy to see all of you guys. There we go. Okay, Paula. Okay, Paula, I have to look at my notes. I really want to get this right. Paula Lichtarowicz. Did I get that right? Please tell me I got that
You
right.
did. That's great.
Yay, the Snow Hare, our March B&N book club pick. Shannon DeVito, my partner in all things books. And I'm Miwa Messer,
Hello.
I'm the producer and host of Port Over. But Paula, we are so excited to see you and talk all things Snow Hare. So before we get started, folks, I want to remind you, if you have not been here before, we are big on spoilers. This is a book club discussion group. So just be prepared for spoilers. It's not something that we always get to do as booksellers. We always like to wait until you guys have read the book, but it's been a bit. The other thing is too, if you would like to use the Q&A module to drop your questions in, feel free. I will be grabbing those as we go. So if you want to use the chat to drop your questions, that's fine too. Q&A module, and someone just dropped it. I have no sound. We have an FAQ in the chat. If you want to check Zoom's FAQ for your sound issue, that's the best place to look. And that's going to be the fast Rebecca short reads. So there you have that. But that's in the chat. There are directions there with the link, and you'll be all set there. But Paula, I've been so looking forward to this conversation, and we have to start with your grandmother.
Yes.
Can we please? Will you bring us up to speed?
Okay. So I grew up with one of those typical Polish grandmothers who liked to wear fur coats, loved the Pope, fed us everything she could, was sort of the life and soul of the family, really. And we always knew there was a secret there, a sort of a story she didn't want to talk about, and that was the war. So obviously I grew up in England. She'd come to England as a refugee. She'd learnt English. It was all quite broken, her language. And we were immersed in this world. On our Saturday, I would go to a Polish school, and after we'd had our lessons in the morning, we'd go down to the bar with my father and have our photos taken under the sign that said "Children Not Allowed," and meet all the old Poles who were there with their war stories and some of the Auschwitz tattoos. And so I was immersed in this, but it was never spoken of by my grandmother.
Right.
And then towards the end of her life, I was an adult by then. I was working as a documentary maker, and I knew stories were important. And I thought, well, we haven't got our families. My grandfather had died, and I thought it was time to sit down with her and hear about her life. So I pretty much forced her to sit down with me. And
Okay.
And it was the first time she spoke about what had happened to her. And she was very reluctant, and it was very hard for her to do. But I think she wanted to tell the story so that the family would have a record.
Okay. Shannon knew none of this when she picked the Snow Rabbit for B&M Book Club. So I'm going to ask Shannon why. I mean, I know why we picked the book, but I would like Shannon to share with the audience why we picked the Snow Hare for B&M Book Club.
I moved past my tears because this book did make me cry. But I thought about how rich it felt and also how personal it felt before knowing the background of this, the type of historical novel that this is, where it is sometimes we have so much World War II historical fiction, and this felt like a somehow oft overlooked piece of it, that there was love and courage and loss, and it's epic in scope, but it's so personal with Lena and her story, and it's weighty and worthy. And I just thought it was absolutely ripe for book club discussions, and the choices she makes and how she overcomes the obstacles. I just thought it was the perfect fit, and couldn't imagine doing a different book. So I'm very, very happy that we had it as our book club pick, that it's been doing so well, and that so many different types of readers have been able to see the Snow Hare and read it and connect with it from different backgrounds, which I also think is what books should do. So it's been great to have it, and that's why we picked it.
Well, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. Paula, I do have a question for you though about how the book started. I know I wanted to set up with your grandma because I love this story, and I love the idea that you got her to talk. I think we all have grandparents where it's like, congratulations, Paula, you got your grandma to talk. But here's the thing. I mean, you do so much in this novel structurally. The character arcs are pretty spectacular for everyone. I mean, yes, Lena is the heart and soul of this book, but everyone gets their arc. So let's just talk from a pure craft perspective. How did the Snow Hare start for you?
I love the idea of craft because I feel I spend most of my time fumbling in the dark. So I'll pretend there's a craft to it.
Okay.
Well, it obviously started from trying to write a form of biography. So I didn't know what I was doing. I had no aim to write a historical novel. I just tried to get my grandmother's life down, and I couldn't make biography work because it took me a long time to realize what many people could have done pretty early on. I would have thought that it doesn't fit the arcs, and I couldn't get the drama. And I also I like to be taken places by the characters as well. I like to feel that they have their own agency, and without that, I find stories a bit flat. That's me personally writing. I need to feel that they're sort of, I'm trying to rein them back, but they're off somewhere. So I had to give up biography, and therefore in stepped Lena. And I became the problems I was having with telling a story about somebody whose life is dictated by greater forces, like the forces of war. I had to find a way to sort of to make that work for me. So it became about her choices, and it became also about her at some point making a choice, and obviously having that moment where she takes control. And this has tragic consequences, but that's and then that sort of ties back in with my grandmother's story. So I sort of use my grandmother's story. I always, in my head, it's a sort of like a washing line where I've got these little pins and there are points I can jump on, and it helps me. But I had to go somewhere else. Having said all that, the context of an old woman looking back on her life was very important to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
It was more than about just Siberia. I feel from some of the responses that people maybe wanted it to be more about Siberia, but for me, it was very much about a life and the interior life and someone's head and how they navigate everything. So that's what I was trying to do.
Right. So Shannon, you and I agree that Lena is our girl, without a doubt. But what's your favorite piece of Lena as a person and as a character? What was the thing that made you say, oh, swing, this, I'm here.
There's...
Oh no, Shannon, did you just freeze? Oh, okay. Shannon just froze. You know, I have to say, all right, so I'm just going to, until Shannon unfreezes, I'm going to yap on for a second here. But I have to say, like, all right, she's really dogged. Lena is really dogged. And it wasn't quite what I was expecting, because I was like, well, she's been brought up a certain way, and her parents are very persnickety, and her sister really just wants to be married. Oh, Shannon's going to come back in. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, you're kind of interesting. And the whole medical school thing, honestly, I'm a bookseller. I don't really have the stomach for, there you are. Hi, Shannon. Are you unfrozen?
My worst nightmare happens.
Okay, you're unfrozen. So now you answer the question.
Yeah. Why, Lena? And I didn't hear any of the conversation, so I'm not sure what brilliance has come out in the last minute. But the reason I loved Lena was she really grew for me, because initially you see her as, kind of different and insular, and you can tell she reacts differently than what's expected of women of the time. And that type I like, but seeing how she approached all the obstacles, wasn't sure about motherhood, but then took it on and created that as such a key part of her life. And there's this one quote that stuck out to me when she's giving advice, which felt like it was advice she had finally taken herself, of asking her these questions of, she's talking to her daughter, and she's, at this moment, your future seems no more perilous than a stream you might follow down from your mountain. Isn't that so? But what happens when other people jump in this clear stream of yours and muddy it with their boots? What happens when love creeps up and puts its hand on your shoulder? What then? And she's kind of asking herself, like, how would I respond? And instead of turning fully inward as anyone would after the horrors of war, kind of creating cracks for love. I think that's what drew me to her, and it made me love her, not only as a protagonist, but just as a fellow woman and a character. So love Lena.
And her secrets. Oh, so many. The women in this book. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about thwarted desire. And I don't just mean love. I mean, like, there are women who don't have careers. I mean, Lena's mom, certainly with the singing until she can't sing anymore. I mean, what a wildly different world. Paula, can we talk about research for a second? Because obviously the humanity of your characters just like constantly we are there, but you did have to do a little bit of work.
Yes. So I started off with the story, and obviously that took quite a long time, quite a few drafts to write. So in between a draft, I would go and do a bit of research. I started off by reading a very big fat book about Poland in the war, just to understand it. And then I would keep coming back to that. I found stories of published accounts of people who'd been exiled to Siberia, Poles, families' accounts, primarily women's accounts. And obviously they had a range of places they were sent. Some were sent to village settlements, some to specific labor camps, some to more sort of hard forced labor camps. So there was just this range of work they were sent to. There was also this book about, it's called War Through Children's Eyes, and that was all about Polish children exiled, and that was very harrowing, just to see how they coped. And obviously what happened to a lot of people was that they didn't get out when Stalin joined the Allies. Many people stayed, and that went on to be, you know, a tragedy for the rest of their lives, people living in very impoverished circumstances forever. They were naturalized, as it were, into the Soviet Union, and lost their Polish citizenship. So I would write a draft and research and come back. And I also read some literature. I read Kolyma Tales by Shalamov, which is very hard reading, Herta Müller, but just things to get me into that sort of headspace of what it would be like for people in that environment.
How long did it take you to write the Snow Hare?
A long time. I would say at least 5-6 years.
Oh, wow. So you're living with this research. You're living with the actual history.
Yeah.
And your grandmother's story.
Yeah. And sometime after that to do some editing with Helen and Jocasta. So it was, yes, it's been around a while for me.
So how do you, and this is something I'm always fascinated by with authors who write historical fiction, how do you balance getting the history right without sounding like you're writing someone's homework assignment?
Well,
and getting the story, like, how do you bring it all together without sort of also feeling like you're dropping the weight of the world on your own head?
I don't know if I've got it all right. I hope I have. What I thought
you did. To be clear,
what I felt was important was that I absorbed as much as I could, and I kept going back to check. I think with my background making documentaries, I like to a big sort of strata of solidity, you know, underneath me. But it was important to me in this that it felt impressionistic, right? It was about a woman's experience, and it's about her experience inside her head. And so I didn't want it to be riddled with dates and places, and I just wanted it to be about, you know, her feelings and her relationships without that sounding wishy-washy. I wanted it to be about, you know, the human experience of being caught up in that. So I hope that sort of got me away from, you know, the date of the Warsaw Uprising or the precise date when Stalin signed his edict. But I, you know, I know the solid facts are there to again, more little pins to hang things on that sort of help you.
Well, isn't it also, I mean, it's that whole idea of the iceberg, like everything is beneath, like, you know what you need to know to make it real. I mean, Shannon, do you have a favorite moment from the Snow Hare? I know you have a lot of favorite moments, but like, do you have a favorite moment?
I love how it starts, frankly, and then, you know, learning the timelines and the different ways she's speaking to the story. I love meeting Pavlov. that the anytime there are dogs in fiction, my heart grows 3 sizes. So just anytime he,
Essential.
yeah, absolutely essential. Anytime he showed up, it just added some levity to a really bleak, sometimes, hopeless but heartfelt narrative. So I love that. And the choices Lena makes throughout. Anytime there's where she chooses to open herself up a little bit and love her daughter and open herself up to love in general, I loved.
All right, I'm going to jump into a question here from Heidi Maggs. Paula, how much of the story was true to your grandmother's experience?
She certainly did not have an affair with anybody, and she would have been, I think the one thing she would have really objected to would have been having an affair with somebody who was from Russia,
right,
because of what happened to her. She was very, very anti anything remotely communist. I mean,
right.
she did try and give me money to not vote for the Labour Party, for example. She used to try and bribe me. Anything that sort of stank of being left wing for her was just a no. In terms of her story, it's really hard to say because there are details, right? So I started off with she said she wanted to be a doctor. She said she met my grandfather at a dance where she refused to dance. There are little moments there that sort of fired me up, but the character of Lena isn't her. She's far more strong-willed, I think. And again, the affair and the love. My grandmother had a fairly conventional marriage to my grandfather.
Okay, Karen Kalinowski, and Karen, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. How hard is it to be researching the history aspect when it's so personal?
I really enjoyed it, if that's the right word. It's probably not, because it got me closer to the story, closer to where that side of my family came from. I think there was a danger for us where it would just all be lost in the past and lost in our childhood. So for me, it was a good thing to do personally.
In terms of the characteristics of Lena, did those start first and then you came up with kind of the obstacles throughout the story, or was it obstacles and then how she would react to them formed who she was as a character? Like her savant-like ability to recite facts sometimes, or how she holds herself, or sometimes make other people uncomfortable just in her lack of reaction.
I tend to feel the character just sort of starts coming out through the writing of it.
Yep.
And then you find ways to say, okay, that's who you are. So now I need to give you a little bit of this situation to see how you react in that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
I start with this idea of this girl who wants to be a doctor and does not want to be, involved with a man at the age of 16, 17. That a lot of that was akin to my grandmother, because she did meet my grandfather young. So I think I started with that. And once you start with that as a situation, you've already got a character rubbing up against something. So from that, she grew. And then the situations arose afterwards.
Yeah, because it sounds to me, just listening to the two of you now, it sounds to me like you read for character, Paula. Like that's always the first thing, and then you go from there. Everything you've said in this conversation until now makes me think that character comes first from you. Maria Falconetti is asking you to talk to us a bit about your choice to use the snow hare symbolism and what it means to you.
Yeah, I would just say on that last one, actually, I do. Character is destiny, absolutely. I think so. It has to be. It drives everything.
Yep.
The snow hare symbolism. Yes, that's an interesting one, because I wasn't going to call it the snow hare. I had a dreadful title, and it was my agent who said that will never sell. So we better think of something else. And I just had this scene. This snow hare was just there, just appeared, and it became this moment. And then because it had come once, obviously it was around to come back at the significant moment of the parting as well. So it's I know it sounds a bit rubbish to say these things were just there, but I wanted life around the camp, and I always want more things than humans. I want dogs, and I want birds, and I want animal life in there. So that the snow hare happened to be there, and then returned, and then my agent said that's a far better title.
So Lori Hawthorne is wondering if you ever hit a roadblock at some point while writing this book, and if so, what did you do to move forward?
Oh gosh, roadblocks all the time. I mean, they because I don't write with a plan, you get to a point and it just feels like you've run out of road. I just go for a walk, be quiet, and then return to it and set yourself a word count and just get going again. And it can be in the wrong place, but you revisit and you repeat, and it gets in a better direction, and you just keep going until it feels like it's sound, like you could hit it and you can't hear any dud notes. You know, it's I just keep going.
Can we talk about some of your influences too? Who are some of the writers and some of the books that helped make you and the Snow Hare?
Oh gosh, I think that's a really hard one. I try and read as widely as I can. I think if I had a history of what I loved, it would start off with things like Catch-22, Catcher in the Rye. I love Nabokov. And I've moved towards, I think, more subtle, more feeling writers like Penelope Fitzgerald, William Trevor. I'm much more involved now and interested in it, sort of interior life and psychology. Obviously, Hilary Mantel, people who can write an absolutely breathtakingly beautiful sentence, and one that is psychologically true, and one that connects with other people. If you can do all those three things in a line, then I think you're a master. Recently, people like James Meek, he wrote a book called The People's Act of Love, based in Russia in I think 1917 and 1919, which was spectacular. Yes, and I've really enjoyed people like Claire Keegan of late. I think she's a master at that perfect sentence that works on every level. So I just read those people and try not to get disheartened. Have another go.
Yeah, I get it. And we have two more questions. And Barbara was Bicky. I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing that properly. I'm sorry if I butchered it. My mother was from Eastern Poland, and I should be wearing my glasses right now, folks, and I totally left them upstairs by accident. My mother was from Eastern Poland, and at age 15 was sent to Siberia with her family and worked in the forests. Upon their release, after following the Polish army, the British set up camps for these refugees. My mother was in India until the end of the war. Where did your grandmother spend the war after leaving Siberia?
So they went to Uzbekistan and joined the Polish Second Army. They then went across the Caspian Sea to Palestine. She then went to Italy. My grandfather was involved in the Monte Cassino campaign. And my grandmother then became pregnant with my father. So she went to Palestine and had my father. They then came over to Wales, and a Polish army sort of camp to disband the officers and the troops. And she was always very cross about that, because she thought she ought to have gone to Argentina, whether the weather and food were far better. So she got stuck in Britain. What can I say?
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to answer someone's question in the chat. Shannon, can you take over for 2 seconds while I type? Because apparently I can't do both at the same time. I'm sorry.
Miwa without glasses is always a journey.
Oh man, I'm literally jumping up on the. I'm totally jumping up on the on this. But after spending,
so many years with a book that also feels so personal, are you thinking about writing another book? And if it is it historical fiction or something completely different? Is it time for a breather after a book like this? Or how do you kind of, after this book is in the world, after so much love and work has gone into it. What is the next thing for you?
Good question. I've just been talking to my English publisher about that, and I mean, historical fiction is there as an option. I'm thinking a lot about revolution. If I could, I'd write an imaginary British revolution that would be happening right now.
Right.
Kind of started by teenagers, but I don't know whether that's too outlandish for me. I'm at an interesting point because I very much enjoyed this more sort of realistic approach. It's dragging me in, and the psychological realism, as it were. I've been quite involved in sort of, I can get distracted by fairy tales and going off into wild places, and I feel like I need to be a bit more grounded. So it might be the Russian Revolution. I'm looking at 1905 Russia. I'm looking at too many things, but
and don't forget amazing. A Place of Greater Safety by Hilary Mantel, possibly one of the best novels ever about the French Revolution. I love that book. She loved that book too. She was very fond of that book, and it didn't quite do what the Wolf Hall and whatnot did. So if anyone is a fan of Hilary Mantel and you have not yet read A Place of Greater Safety, it is really fun. We suddenly have questions from the audience again. So I'm going to go with Russell, and then Lori, and then Ava and Sherry. So be patient with me because, again, I'm squinting at a screen. I'm so sorry, guys. My glasses are on my desk and I'm in the studio. So Russell is asking, the book is amazing in so many ways. I was surprised that Lena's child died at the end. I found this shocking and emotional. Was this a difficult ending to write for you?
Absolutely. I cry every time, actually. Yes, because that's the nub of what kept me with this story, because that's what happened to my grandmother's daughter. So that's what made it true, and that's what I wanted to tell as well as I could. So yes, always hard to write, but glad I wrote it and glad she's not forgotten, as it were.
Yeah. Lori Ferranzo is asking, I'm curious what your day-to-day writing process is like. First thing in the morning, daily word count, time of writing, when do you read? Would just like to hear about your craft process. And then there's an ellipses.
Oh, lovely. I can tell you at the moment it's a disaster. I've been getting very cross with I have a daughter who needs to get to school and a dog. And by the time I've sorted her out, walked the dog, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and my best head is gone. So I've been trying to get up at 5 in the morning to write before I sort everyone else out. And that's just not been working. So that's the plan. But essentially the core of it is to try and do, if you're working on a draft, is to do a good 4 hours, do a good 1,000 to 1,500 words, be strict with myself and keep it going. Then be kind with myself when I read it, and then be less kind and go over it again and make it better, and repeat until it's ready to show someone.
Yeah, a lot of good writing comes in the rewriting and the editing and the things that you say, oh, you know what, this looks so great and it's got to go. It happens. Yeah. Ava Blakova is asking, hello, Paula, brilliant book. Thank you. And I would be interested to know how you came up with the complex timeline, switching between different points in time and revealing the quote future in the process.
Again, maybe this comes back to character. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I just have people who have to be there, or images that have to be seen. So, for example, I had the child running and into the horizon, and I didn't know how that would fit in. I also knew, I wanted this woman at the end of her life, but then I also had her lover appearing as part of the story. And I think what always feels important to me in fiction is what makes it really special is it's a sort of time traveling device, and it's a location traveling. It's just a travel device. You can go to many places. So I'm very happy not to follow a linear line, and to just explore all the possibility, the thoughts that we have in our head, the traveling that we do with our own memories. So that felt necessary, actually, to get the complexity of what she was going through. I mean, essentially it's also, I would say, a novel about dying, coming to terms with things, a reckoning at the end of your life. So that was the overall structure.
So Sherry McHugh, I'm going to come back to your question in a second. I want to hit Pam from SC and then Maria Falconetti, and then I'm also keeping an eye on time because we fly through these events. Pam SC is saying, my grandparents came to the U.S. from Poland, and unfortunately I was too young when they passed to be interested in their life there, but I would love to have had the chance now to talk to my grandmother about her life and how they came to the U.S. Oh, sorry. Okay, so more of a participation than a question. And then Maria Falconetti, did Lena have a sister, and what happened to her family, especially her son? And yes, Alla. Let's talk about Alla for a second, because she did not have the life that any of us expected, and I think that includes Alla. So let's go back to the sister for a second.
So, sorry, the sister in
the novel, Lena's sister,
yeah. Yes, well, she died in the camp. Yeah. So. And her son, was brought up by Lena and Anton. And then obviously he had a daughter, which is the girl that she's passing on the marble, not the marble, the
amber
to. So I think, because the amber's the amber to me was something that came from a very early draft, because I've been playing with this idea that of marbles actually, and somebody having a certain amount of time to live, and the amber had it was passed on by the gypsy before she died, and so it was an idea to me that this would again be passed on by Lena when, just before she died. It was this idea of this little element of security and safety being handed down through females, and also this sort of marker of approaching death. So yes, that was why I wanted Alla's daughter, and I wanted that idea of complicated families, really. Alla lives on in the golden hair, and
speaking of complicated families, so Nancy Tuffin and Linda Andres both have feelings about Anton the husband, and I have feelings about Anton the husband. I think all of us have feelings about Anton the husband. Linda is saying she didn't really like the way that Lena treated her husband. She gets it. I mean, she gets it. She didn't want to be married and everything else, but there's a lot of mean girl to Lena in this. I'm not sure I totally agree, but we're going to talk about this. And then Nancy Tuffin also says, let's see, Lena speaks to Anton and says she didn't know what she did. She also repeats this on her deathbed. Did she mean the choice of having an affair, or the choice to give the antibiotics to the bone man and not having them for her daughter? So can we talk about Anton? Can we talk about the bone man for a second? Can we talk about, the messy bits?
Yeah. I always feel it's for the reader to decide whether people are cruel and kind and whatever. I don't know. I just write it, but I do. I like to think she's not that unfair to him. I feel she tried. I feel what I like about it is they end up making a life together, and it's all right, and they become that. They are broken, but they put themselves together to live their life in England. I think. I feel I understand why she's hard with him when she's in the mountain. And I suppose I would ask you, have you ever been in a relationship with someone who it really hasn't been right with, but you've found it hard to get out of? I think that's really, really hard for someone. So that's why I'm a defender of Lena's behavior. Maybe I shouldn't be, but
I also think what struck me, and I know it was a very different time, she got married at 16, and none of it was her choice. So coming into it with that type of being shackled to this decision and this, not prince of a man, even though he's a man and he tried. I think I thought her reactions were completely understandable in how she approached him.
Yeah, and I think too, Larissa Darduni and Clementine Stowe Daniel, they also sort of feel like Lena was in her place doing her thing. And the idea of being married at 16, and again, we are talking about historical fiction, obviously, but I remember being 16. That was not going to be on my, to-do list. Nancy Jazowski is asking, have you ever gone to Poland to follow your grandmother?
I've been a couple of times. I went not too long after the Berlin Wall came down, which was interesting. We went to see sort of extended family in Warsaw. And then my brother got married to a Polish girl from near where my grandmother grew up. So I went over for the wedding there, but that was it. I haven't specifically been back to my grandmother's hometown. I'd like to one day.
All right, we're coming close to time. So before we get there, and before I ask Sherry McHugh's question, let's see. Okay. Shannon, what do you sort of touched on this at the top of the show when I asked you why we chose the book for book club. But now that we've had this conversation, and now that we've put this book out into the world, and we've had feedback from booksellers and readers, and what do you hope? How do you hope people feel after they read The Snow Hare? I'm not asking you what they think, or takeaway. How do you want people to feel when they finish reading The Snow Hare?
Some level of emotion.
Yeah.
And the gamut of what that emotion is, but thinking about the humanity of experience and what humans do to each other and how that affects an individual, that I think was what affected me. And frankly, made us want to pick a book like this, because it's talking about things that are massive in scope, but it feels so personal because it's character driven, which we love. It's those characters that we can relate to. And when we have those personal relationships or personal experiences, that's what draws you in and makes life rich. So for me, I think it's some sort of level of emotion or reaction, which is what good books do. Right.
Which sets us up for Sherry McHugh's question, which is, Paula, what do you hope readers take away from this story? And that's why I was keeping Shannon sort of focused on the emotional piece of it. But I mean, maybe it's a combination of emotion and more for you, but what do you hope readers take away from The Snow Hare?
I think, I hope people understand how fortunate we are. I come away feeling so fortunate with the life I have, that hasn't happened to me, that I have the choices, that I have the freedoms. That's a massive thing for me. I'd like people to feel a sense of empathy for what other people are going through, and certainly what people are going through today. Britain is just awful at the moment with how it's treating refugees. And I just think this is never going to change. And I would very much like a lot more empathy in the world, and a lot more understanding of what people go through and suffer, and what people carry inside their heads. So yes, understanding of other people. But I'd also like people just to enjoy the story if they can.
We can have both. I promise you, we can have both. And actually, Lisa Phillips and Grace Lynch are sort of riffing on what you just said, Paula, as well. Grace Lynch adds, I enjoy reading a character and not necessarily having to like her. And I think we all know she's talking about our girl, Lena. And Lisa Phillips does come flat out and say, empathy teaches us things we've never experienced and makes us more tolerant, which, yes, this is, and gratitude. Okay, Grace has come back with gratitude, pride in who we are, what we have overcome historically, and how far we have yet to go. We need more empathy. And I think we all agree. I mean, that's the beauty of books. We get to be transported to places that, well, I mean, no offense, I don't really want to live in a tiny space with a goat. I'm delighted the goat was there. I'm delighted the goat took care of everyone, and we met some really fantastic characters. I think this is a really well-rounded supporting cast. I think everyone gets sort of their moment as little brothers and husbands, and luckily you gave us some comic relief, because otherwise, it could have been, well, you had my attention from the first page. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us. This was great. Paula, it was so much fun to hang out with you. Thank you so much. And thank you for writing The Snow Hare. We really appreciate that. Shannon, it's always fun to see you, and I'll see you upstairs in a minute. And also join us again in April. First Tuesday of the month is usually when we do this. We were just a little late this month because, well, we were just a little late, but usually first Tuesday. Paula, thank you again. We cannot wait to see what you do next. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. We're always happy to see you guys. Anyway, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Paula.